Hi, everyone. My name is Noelle Atchison, here on behalf of CoinDesk Studios at the Stellar Meridian event in Madrid. And I'm here with Commissioner Summer Mersinger of the CFTC. Commissioner Mersinger, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm particularly excited about this conversation because the CFTC has been one of the most active regulators in blockchain since the early days. I remember its smart contract primer in 2018, which is a very long time ago in crypto years, just blew our minds. And the strategic planning document, the 4-year strategic outlook the CFTC published last year, mentions DeFi several times, stressing the need for engagement with the ecosystem. And you're here at this event, so obviously the engagement is continuing. What is your takeaway, on a personal level, if you wish, from this event and others like it?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a great opportunity for education, especially at events like this. There's both the education from the stakeholders to the regulators, so we understand the markets, the innovation, the problems that they're able to solve with new technology, and the various applications and just the efficiencies in the market that could come with the use of DeFi, with the use of distributed ledger and blockchain. And then for us as regulators, I think it's important for us to talk to stakeholders so they understand our rules and our regulations and how we may expect them to comply with those laws and comply with those rules, and make sure that they're doing basic, I'd say, protecting customer assets and making sure you know who your customers are. And so it really is an education opportunity where we both have something to offer.
It's also a gargantuan task because blockchain DeFi ecosystem is vast and rapidly changing, and markets are vast and rapidly changing, and you have a lot of other things to monitor as well, let's face it. About how much of your time today is spent on blockchain technology, and has that changed much over the past couple of years?
Yeah.
A year and a half since you've been there.
Yeah, it's a lot. We do spend a lot of time talking about it. A lot of, unfortunately, a lot of enforcement cases dealing with it. Trying to understand how those who would like to be in the market and do things properly and follow our rules and regulations, how that's possible, how our regulations and rules, which we have principles based, so there's some flexibility there, and we have a statutory mandate to promote responsible innovation. So how are we able to do that? So we spend a lot of time talking about crypto. And we do have a large regulatory remit. Sometimes we're talking about oats and cattle, and the next day we're talking about crypto and blockchain technology. So it is a lot to think about, but certainly we are spending a lot of time talking about blockchain, crypto, digital assets, and what this new innovation means for markets going ahead.
Especially complicated because innovation is a big picture concept, whereas rules need to be fairly detailed. Would you agree with that? Do you think it's possible to support innovation and draw up some big picture rules?
Yeah, and I think that's why there's a lot of interest in having the CFTC as kind of the primary regulator. Our rules are very flexible. They're principles-based. They're more outcome-based. And we really give those who are registered, those who we oversee, some flexibility to figure out how they're going to comply with the outcome that we want. And I think that's important in this industry because the financial regulations that apply to banks and, kind of the old school Federal Reserve, moving of money, it doesn't necessarily work when you're talking about innovation. But we have a long history of innovation at the CFTC. We went from open outcry markets and trading on, trading floors to electronic trading. And that was a very short kind of transition. And we were able to seamlessly move from the trading floors to kind of a hybrid to all trading being done electronically. So we have this history of allowing innovation, finding a way to have our regulations and rules, flexible enough so that the market stakeholders can innovate, and at the same time making sure that people's money is protected, and that they know the risks that they are getting into, and that that we're applying the responsibility that I think comes with handling people's money.
Absolutely. I mean, innovation, especially in something as malleable as derivatives, evolves rapidly. But as you say, protection is, of course, the key responsibility of any regulator. Commissioner Mersinger, your very thoughtful dissent on the recent CFTC actions against 3 DeFi platforms for unregistered derivatives offerings stressed the point that the Commodities Exchange Act was written for centralized entities. Could you give us a couple of examples of how those rules are hard to apply or impossible to apply in some cases to decentralized platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. The way the markets around the market structure for derivatives is very intermediated, and they each have these different entities that have different responsibilities. So when you try to apply, even very flexible principles-based regulations to a new model where you don't have intermediation, it is difficult to figure out, okay, where do you apply the rules? Who's going to be responsible to make sure that some of those basic rules and disclosures are being offered to those who are, putting their own money into products and markets. And my concern with some of our enforcement actions is we are coming in and saying, you need to comply with our rules, you need to register with us. By the way, there's no way to register with us. What you do doesn't work, but we're still going to hold you liable for violating our statute. That's not to say that I think you can have a, decentralized protocol that is set up to violate, financial services regulations and no one would be held liable. But I think we need to have some sort of conversation and offer some certainty to those who are trying to innovate to say, okay, here are the rules, here are the regulations, here are expectations. We have to figure out how, you can comply, and if there's, a problem, who's going to be responsible? And those 3 cases, it was unfortunate, for a couple of reasons. One is we grouped them together. So it was 3 separate cases that we grouped together for what I think was probably a headline, a news headline. We called it the DeFi sweep. There were different charges there, and I think we were just trying to lump it all together when there were very separate facts and circumstances in these cases. And I think the other thing is some of these entities, I think, would want to comply. And we just really said, there's no way for you to comply. Your option is to shut down and pay the penalty that we're going to impose on you. And to me, that's not fair. That's regulation by enforcement. And it leaves a very it's complete lack of clarity as to what somebody can do to comply.
It's that adage, not knowing the rules doesn't exempt you from having to comply with them, but nobody knows the rules here. Therefore, it's much easier for people to build outside. And the United States is the world's largest financial market because of its reputation for innovation. This is, as I'm sure the CFTC understands, one thing that this industry finds frustrating. They want to comply, but they don't know how, as you mentioned. In your dissent, you also talk about the advantage of setting rules before going for enforcement, as you've just said. And generally in life, simple rules are better than complex rules, easier to comply with. But do you think DeFi applications and the underlying technology lend themselves to simple rules? Do you think it's possible in a world in which it's very hard to even know who is responsible for an application?
Yeah, I think that there are probably what I call the low-hanging fruit, where we could say, here are the rules that need to be that you have to comply with, and you tell us how you're doing that. But I think these are innovators. So I think that they're perfectly capable of finding ways to comply with the rules. We're just not telling them what they are. And we're holding them accountable without explaining how they should or can, comply with the rules. So, until we start working with DeFi protocols and decentralized entities who are trading, derivatives or leverage products, until we start working with them, we're just coming in and saying, we're going to shut you down and we're going to have an enforcement case and we're going to say you're breaking the rules, but you might not know the rules that you're breaking, or you might not understand how you could, register as this entity, even though there's no possible way at this point. So there needs to be a conversation. We need to set some clear rules and kind of a how to comply. Here's how you comply. Here's what we need you to do. Here's what happens if you don't do it.
It's always coming from the priority of protecting investors.
Yeah.
And as has been pointed out, the 3 platforms caught in the recent CFTC action hadn't actually harmed anyone. So this is getting ahead of potential harm, which, as we know, especially if you have children, you don't want them to play outside because that's just not safe, right? It doesn't foster development.
Right.
So what would you say, Commissioner Mersinger, to those who think that DeFi can't be regulated?
I think that that's very short-sighted. I think if that's the conclusion that you come to, especially in the U.S., we're going to miss out on some pretty fantastic, opportunities and innovation. This is going to move offshore, and the demand is there. People want to be involved in these markets. They want to trade on, decentralized protocols, and we're going to drive them into markets where we have no visibility. And that's not the way we usually approach things in the U.S. But I do fear that we're gonna drive everything offshore, and what we've prided ourselves as a very robust financial industry in the U.S. could potentially fall behind because we're not willing to really understand and embrace the technology and find out how we can put the basic safeguards that need to be in place when you're handling people's money, but at the same time allow this innovation to flourish.
And not only fall behind, but also leave investors who want to get involved and will find a way to do so unprotected.
Yep.
It's better to work inside than outside because there are at least disclosure rules and things like that can be implemented. And in closing, because unfortunately I think we're running out of time here, I could talk to you all day. Do you have any recommendations for DeFi startups?
I would say talk to the regulators. I know that can be scary, but I think you will find people who are willing to hear what you would like to do, and we know that we can learn from people who are coming up with the new ideas and new innovations. So part of it is talk to the regulators, ask, what are some important rules and laws that are kind of you absolutely have to comply with this as long as you're, in financial services, these are the laws you have to comply with, so you at least understand that aspect. And, don't get discouraged, because I know it's probably easy when you see these enforcement cases. It probably stops some people in their tracks. Yeah, you don't want the government knocking on your door saying, you owe us money. So I think it really is just trying to find the right people to talk to, be willing to knock on the door. I've always said, I've worked in DC for a lot of years, and I always said, tell your story before someone else is telling your story. So go in and talk to people and educate them about what you're trying to do before someone comes in and says, I don't like what you're doing, and then you're suddenly in trouble for breaking a law that you knew nothing about. So I think that's the most important thing for folks who are trying to start up in DeFi and come up with some new ways to use the innovation in our financial services markets.
And that sounds like a win-win, a win for the startup
Yeah.
because they understand the regulators' priorities, but also a win for the regulators, not just to keep abreast of what's going on in the technology, but also at events like this, one thing we find out is what's coming, what
Yep.
what are we not able to do yet that we will be able to do soon, and you get ahead of the potential risks
Yep.
that way.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. Commissioner Mersinger, thank you so much for being here with us today and for giving us some of your time and helpful advice to DeFi startups.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for watching this.